I'm Mike Costello, and I'm here with Dr. Iris Freelander. And today we'd like to talk to you about dealing with hurt feelings. All of us at different points in time in our lives get our feelings hurt. And one of the things that we know in New Thought metaphysical philosophy is that the things that go on in our minds, the way that our minds operate, determine the quality of our life. And so, really, none of us can afford to have hurt feelings for very long because those hurt feelings damage us and do a great deal of harm to us, don't they, Iris?
Indeed, and too often, unfortunately, we get hurt feelings when the other person doesn't really mean anything in that negative way. They're just saying what they wish would or wouldn't be, and so we're very remiss when we do that, when we allow our feelings to be hurt, and if we just say, "I don't understand why you're saying that," then usually it can be worked out, can't it?
It can, and it's kind of interesting how many people do so easily get their feelings hurt. And when that happens, they seem to have long periods of unhappiness and discontent, don't they?
Yes, it seems that the people who get their feelings hurt so easily are those who do have not just winters of discontent, but summers too. That's being too facetious, but it's true that it's a mindset. And you always say we live in our minds and not in the world. And so if in our mind we're going to say, well, I know that person really didn't mean it that badly, and if they do mean it that badly, they have a right to their opinion.
We should probably talk about some of the causes of hurt feelings, and I think we also need to talk about how it is people can overcome the situation of having hurt feelings or very easily having their feelings hurt. I think one of the things that we talked about, and we just talked about this at the church service last Sunday, is that people so often get their feelings hurt in past experiences, something that happens at a point in time, and then they refuse to let that go, and they hold on to it for an extended period of time, and they relive it. And so the hurt, which could be momentary or could be a sting, actually becomes a devastating pain that lasts for many, many years.
Yes, that's really sad when anyone allows their lives to be disjointed like that, because it's not necessary. And if people want to hold a grudge, then they can hold a grudge. But if they want to just see the thing all the way through, then they can, and there won't be those hurt feelings. And many people don't realize that we just have a certain amount of energy that comes through our body constantly. And if we send a lot of energy out in those hurt feelings, especially into the past, then it takes away the energy that we could use for more worthwhile things for the present. And another way, the second way people lose their energy most fully with anger. Whenever we're angry, our energy just spurts out. And if you were being Corellian photographed, then it would show that the energy is just going out in all directions, blindly going out. And then we're losing that good energy. And very often people will get diseases in specific parts of their torso because they've had anger shooting out of their body too much of the time in their lifetime.
And we know about the mind-body-spirit connection. We talk a lot about that at our center and in our work. And we need to remind people always that the quality of the process of thinking, the way that we think, determines to a large extent, to total extent, the quality of our life. And if our minds are filled with negativity, if our minds are filled with hurt or pain or anger or depression, anguish or depression, any of the negative aspects that we're talking about today, then that has an outpicturing in the physical body, doesn't it?
Yes, indeed, it does. And as I said, it can cause disease, and often does. And those people who are totally clairvoyant can see where those diseases start. And they start in the higher bodies, in the energy area of the bodies first, and then work down to the physical body. And it would just behoove us to all work through our anger and work through that instead of letting it stay so long. And in a sense, that stress is good for us at times. We need certain stress to do what we need to do. And if we need to discuss something with a person who's being very unpleasant to us, then we need that extra energy to get our point across, not in anger, but to just get our point across and be strong in our own right. And if when we're strong in our own right and speak up, most people respect us for that. And if they don't respect us, they're not going to be amiable anyway.
Mhm. And that goes to the very heart of New Thought, which has to do with our self-esteem and our
Yes.
view of ourselves. And in our counseling work, you and I both spend a lot of time dealing with people who have self-esteem problems. And I think if we tend to get our feelings hurt easily, then at the core, there is an issue with our self-image, isn't there?
Yes, it is. And then we're at fault there because we can't let other people push us around like that. And when we stay strong in our own right, and there's a phrase that we used to use for our Wednesday night church services, and we use it and we hear it all the time: take back your power. A lot of people are saying that, take back your power. So I would say to anyone listening who allows others to like walk all over them, take back your power. And it doesn't mean be angry and hateful. It just means be strong in your own right. Stand up for what you believe in. And when we stand up for what we believe in, other people respect us.
And as we allow these hurt feelings to go on and allow them to become deeper and deeper in our consciousness and in our awareness, we really are giving over our power, aren't we? We're
Yeah.
giving to that person, to what has been said or done to us or about us. We're giving that power to continually inflict pain and suffering upon us. And of course, none of us would want that if we think of it from a logical standpoint.
Yes, but when we allow people to affect us and make us angry, if we allow anyone to bring out negativity within us that's strong and uncontrollable or unpleasant, then we're not really taking charge of our own lives. We're not taking back our power. To take back our power is to be strong in our own right and to speak up when we are being challenged, to stand up for what we believe in, and to always believe in something and to stand up for that.
And to make a choice.
Yes.
And always we have the opportunity to make a choice, and the choice is always whether we're going to see something positive from an experience or see something negative. And we're not at all saying that people won't get hurt feelings, because there are situations, a multitude of them. All of us get hurt feelings from time to time. But the question is how we deal with those hurt feelings and whether we're able to overcome them quickly and rapidly so that we can move on with our lives and to stop allowing people to hurt us and to continually inflict harm upon us. Because in many instances, hurt feelings, the person who said the thing or did the thing in the first place has gone on with their life and they've forgotten about it completely in many instances. And yet, as many individuals continue to relive this issue.
Yes, well, after your talk on Sunday, a lot of people were talking about, at the church, were talking about that, and they were saying, how do you handle that when you get angry? And I said, well, I was at a health institute a number of years ago, and they taught us there, because a lot of people who were there because they were anger or other negativity that caused illness in their bodies, and the people who ran that institute knew that, and so they taught us to say cancel, cancel. And we can always have any word. It wouldn't matter what the word is, but we can remind ourselves, we can use that word to remind ourselves that this is that we want to cancel that out. We want to drop it. And as I was saying earlier, to stand up for your own right, well, I don't mean to challenge everyone on everything, because very often it's not worth any energy and effort to challenge certain people. Just let it go.
And in some instances, the person who hurts our feelings never intended to do that in the first place.
Exactly.
And sometimes are totally unaware of the fact that anything has happened. And it's our sensitivity. And really, as we always discuss, it's what goes on in our mind, how we respond and react to the circumstances and situations that determine the quality of our life. And we are always able to control the way that we think about circumstances and situations.
Yes, indeed. And we need to sometimes just remind ourselves, if we're living in a situation where, for example, if we have children around us who are difficult to handle, or if we have a spouse or other family members who are going through a process of where they're not very pleasant to live with, then we have to just realize that that's what they're doing, and we have to, again, if it impacts on us, let them know that we're not going to handle that. We're not going to have it. But we can just really be as Jesus was, where he said, turn the other cheek. And if we could remember that, it would go a long way. And what he was saying was, don't be upset. What I believe he was saying was, don't be upset that this person is doing that. because what does it really matter?
And that is a theme that runs through his life. And of course, as the way shower, the exemplifier of the perfect life, we certainly can look to that as a model. And in his life, he had a lot to be hurt about. I mean, he could have had his feelings hurt very easily. And yet we see this serene character, this person who was centered in the presence. And of course, we talk in New Thought a lot about being centered in the presence, and by being centered in the presence, we bring ourselves out of these negative experiences into the reality of who and what we are as perfect children of God, and that's exactly what he did. And so as people around us do things and say things, they do things and say things for a variety of reasons, some of which we don't even understand. And in his example, here he had his followers who were learning supposedly what he had to teach them, and yet at every turn they were bickering and fighting among themselves. Even at the end of his life and ministry, they were fighting and bickering. And yet, here he was as this serene person, and one of the things that he said to his followers was, "What is that to you?" when questioning what other people have done. Because, in fact, in many cases, when people say and do things, that's an issue for them, and yet we internalize it, and we take it personally, and we get hurt by it. And then we become damaged by something that someone else has done, and therefore we have allowed ourselves to have injury inflicted upon us. And that is an issue of responsibility, of personal responsibility, and again, going back to understanding who and what we are.
Yes, and very often we misunderstand other people's motives and other people's words. I have a friend who lives far away from here who we exchange emails occasionally, not really often, but occasionally. And I don't know who sent the last email, but the last one I received from her was this week, and she said, "Are you angry at me about something? Because I've not heard from you, and I'm really concerned that I might have hurt your feelings when I was there because I've not heard from you." And I thought, what a silly thing, of course.
But her feelings were hurt,
Yeah.
and how easily her feelings could have been hurt by that innocent encounter.
Yeah, her feelings were hurt because I hadn't been in contact with her, and she was underestimating me, thinking my feelings were hurt about God knows what, because she didn't know how she could have hurt my feelings, and I wouldn't know either because there's no way she could. Because true friends don't hurt each other's feelings. They understand what the other is saying. But that's just an example of how we will often let things get to us, and just little things just ride and become larger and larger. But it's good that someone can face the issue like that.
Very important that people are able to face the issue and deal with circumstances and situations. We'd like to pause at this point in the program and offer you an opportunity to receive some literature so that you can continue the study of the concepts and ideas that we're sharing with you at home.
We would like to give you the opportunity to explore and discover in your own home the new thought teachings that this program is sharing with you by sending you a free copy of one of these booklets. Simply address your request to Confident Living at P.O. Box 7726, Long Beach, California, 90807. Whatever your dream, whatever your vision, you can reach it through confident living.
Before the break, we were talking about ways in which we have our feelings hurt. And maybe in the last half of the program, we can talk about some changes in our way of thinking that can avoid the near occasion of having our feelings hurt. And we are going to have our feelings hurt. I think one of the things that we'd like to share with those who are viewing is that it's really important for us not to have unrealistic expectations of other people. And one of the expectations of other people that we have is that they're going to behave the way that we think they should. And I think the one lesson that we know, especially in truth and new thought, is that people are going to behave in the way that they need to or choose to or decide to, and that the way other people behave and the actions of other people really only impact us to the extent that we allow them to. That's very difficult when we're in relationships. It's very difficult when we're in family situations dealing with children or husbands and wives to understand that our spouse or our children are going through circumstances and situations over which we may not have a great deal of control. But it's very, very important for us not to have unrealistic expectations. And one of the real unrealistic expectations that we almost all have is that we think people ought to behave in a certain way. And the thing we need to understand is people are never going to behave all of the time the way we think they should. And that means that people are not going to say the nicest things to us all of the time. And I think that's very important to remember.
It is very important. And then at the same time, we can just like consider the source. And we have certain cliches in our own head that play a tape. And we can just say we consider the source when people say things that hurt us. I know a young couple who are very happily married, one of the most happily married young couples I know. And so she prepares their dinner every night, and he does other things, and they both work and they have equal chores. But when he doesn't come to the table, when she calls him one time, she just goes ahead and eats. And one time I was with him, and I said, "Oh, you're eating before your husband comes downstairs." And she said, "If I waited for him, I'd probably be angry before he got down here." She said, "He knows dinner's ready, and if he doesn't want to come down, that's his prerogative. It means he's busy on the computer or the telephone, and there's something very important relating to his work that he has to do." And she was just very calm about it. And she didn't, and I thought that was so lovely and so wonderful that she didn't get upset and say, "Oh, I cooked this dinner." She didn't say anything negative. She just understood. And isn't it nice when people can live together and come to terms in that way?
And absolutely imperative if we're going to have positive and affirmative relationships. And if we have positive relationships, we have to understand that there are aspects of the other person that allows them the freedom to do certain things that they need to do.
Yes. And so we might all look, if we have a tendency to be impatient or angry or to get hurt feelings, we might look to see what's causing my hurt feelings. What is it? And really evaluate what it is. Because usually it's within the person, as you said earlier, it's within the person and their own self-image. And so we need to examine that and see what it is, because it's important that we do that. It's important that we know what causes us to be upset and to have hurt feelings, because it doesn't add to the richness of life to carry around any kind of negativity, and particularly hurt feelings.
Absolutely. And self-examination is fundamental to New Thought metaphysical philosophy. And we understand completely, to be healthy spiritual and physical beings, that we need to have introspection. And we do need to look within over and over and over again. And you're exactly right, Iris, in the fact that when we have hurt feelings, when we have any negative experience, we need to look within. And we need to examine our consciousness, our way of thinking, and how our mind is operating. And if our mind is embracing the negative aspects of life, if this woman, for instance, was agonizing every night she cooked dinner, then it would be time at some point for her to sit down and look within and look at what the source of her unhappiness was. Because in her case, her unhappiness was non-existent. She was happy because she wasn't creating unrealistic expectations, and because she had released the circumstance and situation to the way it is. Someone else may expect their husband to come every day at 6 o'clock and sit down dutifully, and others may be annoyed by the fact that he does. And so each one has a different circumstance and situation and a different mind dynamic.
Yes, and that's an excellent example of how we need to see where we get upset and then what we can do about it. And usually we can say it doesn't matter, and it really doesn't matter that much. And then if one is late for a meal, then they can enjoy being together when they are together, which that young couple would always do. So, and usually that would be true. There are people in this world, unfortunately, who like to create chaos and confusion. But we just have to deal with them in our own calm way, in our own serene way. And when they know that they're not getting to us, then they're not as chaotic.
On the Sunday, when we were talking about this very subject, one of the things that I invited the congregation to do was to use the technique of detaching and rise. That in our consciousness, whenever we're faced with a negative experience, and I think this is a fundamental Christian teaching, we don't apply it very often, but that runs throughout the entire New Thought Christian philosophy, and that is that detachment and resurrection have to do with letting go of circumstances and situations and rising above them. And that's really what has to happen in our mind when we're faced with situations like hurt feelings. We have to stop. We have to detach from that experience. That is, stop reliving it, stop rehashing it, stop trying to figure it out. Detach and rise or resurrect, come above it, and then look at it with fresh, new eyes and try to understand why it is we're responding. It's not the other person that needs to be changed, and that's key too. The other person doesn't need to be changed. We need to be changed, and the situation never needs to be changed. It isn't whether he comes to dinner or not that needs to be changed. What needs to be dealt with is how I deal with whether he comes or he doesn't come. And it's always the what's happening in us that's important. And I think that's also the message of New Thought, is that we always need to be operating from that center of peace and happiness and joy and prosperity and abundance and all of the other positive attributes of life. And we need to understand that anytime we find ourselves anywhere else, we need to detach and rise. We need to look at it, look at ourselves, and look at how we're responding to circumstance.
And be reasonable and logical and not say in our hearts, he or she is just doing this to irritate me, because usually people don't do that. And if they do, they're not, then we can just, as you said, detach and rise from that. But as a rule, it's just life flowing, and people can't come together always in perfect harmony and be together just as they would like. But again, it's how we react to the situation. And as we look about us and see all the negativity, the turmoil, the problems in the world, then we don't want to add to those problems. We just want to get our own house in order and be calm and peaceful and serene. We can be that way when we have, first of all, as you said earlier, good self-esteem. If we realize each person is equally important, and we often say in our church, God and I are one, and we're all one with our fellow man, with each other. So we're equally important. And if we can remember that we don't need to tell people what to do, and don't have high expectations of other people, because they might have higher expectations of themselves than we do. It's just in a different direction. They're going in a different direction. And so we never know where other people are coming from in their own minds.
No, and we spend so much time trying to analyze and trying to tell other people what they're doing and why they're doing it, when in fact, the reasons that they're doing it have nothing to do with us. And we know that everyone is going through the processes of life. We're all on a pilgrimage, and we're all here to learn lessons. We're here to learn to be stronger, better, more positive, affirmative persons. And we're here to help and support and nurture one another. And in that process, we have to allow others to do what they do, to go through what they're going through. And we have to embrace our own life and our own peace in the midst of every circumstance.
Exactly, and we have no control over how other people act or react, because we might think that we do, but we really don't, because people react and act the way they wish to, and that's their right. And if we can always remember that's their right, and all we have to be concerned about is our own feelings and our own actions and our own thoughts. And as we interface with other people, if we just accept them as wonderful, they will usually act very wonderful.
One of the fundamentals of the teaching is to see good in the midst of everything, and to see good in the midst of the most negative. And that's simply a fundamental teaching. That is to see beyond the appearance of conflict and strife. And one of the things that you and I know well in counseling work is that as we counsel people who are in, especially relationship problems, and almost everything is relationship oriented, that the first thing that most people are willing to tell us is what the other person does wrong or why they do it. And we have to come back again and again in counseling and remind people, let's not talk about him or her. Let's not talk about the child. Let's not talk about the job. Let's not talk about the money. Let's talk about how you're feeling. And then let's talk about why you're feeling that way and what we can do together to make you feel better and to feel the way you should feel, as we say in New Thought, as a perfect and whole child of God. And so when that perspective comes into our way of thinking, and as we say so often, when we have the mind of Christ, when we begin to think as Christ thought and see as he saw other people, then we are empowered and strengthened. And then that issue of his example of life was, no matter what happened, he was always peaceful and serene. No matter what happened, no matter what people did, he could overlook it. No matter how bad they were, he could embrace them. No matter how hateful they were, he could love them. That aspect is just a magnificent dynamic for us to understand.
Yes, and when we use that example as our guide and try to live the life in that way, it's all, again, in our own mindset. If we decide we're going to be happy and whole, then that's what we'll be. If we decide we're going to have hurt feelings, that's exactly what we will have. So I would encourage everyone to just evaluate their own life and evaluate how life is going for them on a day-to-day basis and what they need to do. And very often we're angry at ourselves because of our own inadequacies. Perhaps we decide we're going to exercise every day and we don't do it. Then we're angry at ourselves and then we're upset with other people. But it's actually at ourselves that we're angry. Or we decide we're going to lose some weight and then we don't do that and we ate a bunch of chocolate and then we're upset with ourselves. So we need to examine, know ourselves. But above all, we just need to just know. It's just a supreme knowing that we are whole, we are important, and other people are equally important and hopefully whole. But we don't judge, as you said, we don't judge.
We don't judge. And the other thing that we want to do in the last minute or two that we have is we want to make sure, as we always do in this program and at church and everywhere we speak, that we're not telling anyone that they have to change their faith. We're not telling anyone that they have to believe what we believe. What we're saying is that these truths and that these ideals that we're sharing cross all faith and denominational lines. They cross East and West. They're universal principles that can be applied regardless of what anyone's faith is. And so that's a real important issue because so often people think that they have to believe as we believe, and that's not the case at all. These are principles that transcend belief systems.
And universal truth is just that. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what church people go to. It doesn't matter what race, color, or creed. It just matters the person functioning from their own core being. And when they do, we can see it in their faces, we can see it in their lives, but above all, they can see it in their own sense of well-being.
Right. And we always have a choice. And every one of us has a choice to choose and decide whether we want to be hurt or whether we want to be happy, and whether we want to deal with life in a positive, affirmative way, or whether we want to have difficulty and strife. And so we hope that you found the information we've been sharing with you helpful and useful, and we look forward to seeing you next time.